Okay, good evening. It is, what is the January 19, that's right. Yeah, January 19, 2020. This is our first Zoom get together for 61651. And I'm going to record this for the people that cannot be here. I might have to stop recording about halfway through and start again. 2 hours of recording. Sometimes the system doesn't like chunks that are that big. I tend to just dump it up into YouTube and create a link and put it back down. I know there's a lot of different ways. And when I watched the videos that you all created for me, all different ways of doing it, and there's not a wrong way. So let's see. I asked you all to create videos about yourselves, and mainly because I know most of you know each other, because I know you're a pretty strong cohort. And so let's see. Most of my family's teachers. My grandmother was a teacher. My dad's a retired superintendent. My mom passed a couple years ago, but she was a third grade teacher. My aunt was a teacher. My oldest brother's a retired superintendent. His wife is a retired teacher. My middle brother is a retired teacher. My cousin was a teacher. She's still teaching. My wife was a special education teacher for 26 years, mostly middle school. She does not like me to use the word retired, but I'd say that's just what it is. Let's see. Our daughter is in her 6th year of teaching. She's a 2nd grade teacher in Olathe. And she's married to a former Marine, and he's bigger than I am. When I first met him, I said, Catherine, how am I going to intimidate a Marine? Because that was always my thing all through. And she said, Dad, you did the first time you met him. I go, oh, okay. I didn't even walk through with my shotgun like I did with one boyfriend one time. I did too. School is what we do. Family of teachers. We never said we were going to work. We always said we're going to school. Okay, that's a big difference. And that's who we are, and that's the way we look at things. We go to school. We don't go to work. And so I think that when I watched your videos, I got a sense that those of you in this cohort are all roughly in the same points in your life, and seem to be, you have a lot of the same characteristics. Not to stereotype, if all of you were preparing to be math and science teachers, your brains would be wired a little bit more like mine. I was a science teacher, but you all are preparing yourselves to be school counselors. And so I taught for 6 years. Yeah, I started out in Brookfield Middle School teaching science. And then I went back to graduate school and came out, and I was a high school principal in Paris, Missouri for 2 years. Then I was a middle school principal in Savannah for a year. Then I went to Hannibal we went to Hannibal for 6 years. And then we went to Warrensburg, and I was a high school principal in Warrensburg for 8. And then I finished out my 25 years. The last 2 years, I was a director of the Career and Tech Center there in Warrensburg. And after that, I went to DESE, Missouri's Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, for 3 years. I commuted from Warrensburg to Jeff City for 3 years, and it was not good. Working out of a cubicle in a 7-story building was a culture shock for a high school principal. But it was good. It was a good experience. It really was, to see things from the point of view of working in a governmental agency like DESE. Then, but I knew all along I wanted to be I had been positioning myself all along to be a professor. And my elementary principal always called me the little professor. So I guess he probably knew that where I was going. So I'm in my 10th year at Northwest. I'm an associate professor now. And I teach a variety of classes, primarily in the ed leadership world, preparing people to be principals. I also coordinate our alternative certification program. So I work with people in that world that are non-traditional coming into teaching. So there's a lot of parallels to the conversations I have with them and the conversations that we will have this semester. So 61651 has evolved. Nod your head if you've already had 61650, the course leading up to this. Okay. 61650 and 61651 used to be, they were designed to be companion classes, designed to be absolutely one after another, one semester to the next. And they still essentially are. But as time has gone on, and as our courses at Northwest have evolved, essentially, most of the time, the only people that take this class are counselor ed folks, which I enjoy that because it lets us have very specialized conversations. And so I can tell you that when I was a principal working on my specialist degree, I got my bachelor's and master's degrees at UCM in Orangeburg, and then specialist and doctorate at Mizzou. And when I was working on my specialist, a course in my program, which I did not understand at the time why I was taking it, was comprehensive guidance curriculum. And so do you know the name Norman Geisbers? Okay, he kind of the guru of comprehensive guidance in Missouri. Well, he was my professor. So as far as principal types, I always felt like I had a little bit better understanding about the world. Well, as much as the principal was going to have about the counselors, but it gave me a little bit more of an understanding when we talked about comprehensive guidance, things like that. Actually, Norm and I kind of spar is too strong of a word. We went back and forth a little bit because I was a small school principal, and he'd be talking about non-guidance activities and how I should shield the counselor from non-guidance activities. And I would always say, well, yeah, I agree, but Alice was my counselor and it was me, and everybody else was in the classroom. There was nobody else to do all of the stuff that, the scheduling, all that extra stuff in the school is either me or Alice. And, if I was talking to some knucklehead in the office about behavior, that left her the other stuff. So we went back, good naturedly, but we'd go back and forth about that. And, but it gave me a better feel, I think, for that. And I think it'll help us in our conversations here, which led me to have an understanding of what the goal of this course as it has evolved and as we're able to do it just with this cohort that's right here. You all, and we're going to talk about this, but you all probably talked about the models of teaching last semester, and you probably zeroed in on a model of teaching that you communicated back and forth about. And so, and I said in the video that there's at least 3 concepts that we're going to take and we're going to put them all together. Shmush was the word I were shmush them all together. And so that's not a word. We're going to take the models that you've talked about. We're going to take the teacher standards, the 9 teacher standards, and the comprehensive guidance standards, and put them all together in a salad and mix them together. And it's something that would be hard to do if we didn't have just a defined cohort like we have here. So I was talking to my wife a little while ago about this class we're going to have here, and I was talking to her about the concepts that it's my goal that you all will have a chance to practice these things with the students you have in your practicum setting right now, which is, the way I see it, it's a perfect time for you to be doing this, okay? Because I have a goal that the stuff we talk about, you actually do that with kids in your schools, in your practicum settings, which is why I was asking about where you all are to ensure that it appears to me like you all sometime in your setting will have access to kids. Okay, so this course will spin heavily around 4 of the teacher standards: 1, 2, 5, and 7. There was a time when we called them the Final Fours. Very important teacher standards, and well, they're all important, but standard 1 will heavily, and that'll be the first one we'll talk about. It talks a lot about student engagement. So I will be asking you to record yourself, among other things, talking with your colleagues in the buildings and recording yourself teaching a lesson to kids with a focus on student engagement. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to do 4 videos of yourself teaching, and this is all on the Canvas site. But each time you will have a focus to talk about. One of them is classroom management, the environment, that kind of thing. So you'll want to, and I know that district by district, building by building, it varies as to what the permissions are for recording in a classroom for professional development needs. A lot of people will just turn their camera around. They'll have a recording going, turn their laptop around facing the kids and let it run. You'll need to be in tune to your building policies as to what your principal will let you do. It's best if, from my point of view, it's best if I can see the kids and not see you. I hear your voice, but it's much more important to me that this is from my days as a principal, when I'd come into a classroom and I would call it, I would slither in the back of the room like a 200-pound lizard, slither in the back of the room and kind of sneak in and watch the teachers. Okay, I would do that off and on all day. It was my goal as a principal at Warrensburg, and it was a good sized building, about 1,000 kids. It was my goal to walk into every single classroom every single day as a lead principal. I had 2 assistant principals, had my athletic director, had 65 teachers. It was a big place, but I felt it was important for me to be in the classrooms. And I learned to zero in on what the kids were saying, what the kids were doing. And I would ask kids, well, what are you doing today? I usually say, do you have a clue what you're doing? And so talking to the kids, that's all versions of student engagement. Okay. I've since found out that some of the big wigs in education, like Marzano or Hattie or one of those guys, talked about doing the same thing, watching what the kids were doing. I thought to myself, well, I came up with that myself 15 years ago. I just didn't write it down. Okay, which is the way that education goes. So that's my hope, that you'll be able to turn the video on the kids so I can see what's going on. But I am aware that I have no horsepower with your principals, and that it's just going to be what it's going to be. So I really don't know if as I look over where you all are. Not really. I don't know that I have any direct connections with your principals. Doesn't matter. Just have that conversation with them about recording yourself teaching lessons and what are the permissions. So, and I'm hoping that it's a larger. I'm hoping that it's not a one-on-one with a kid. Okay, and that gets way too personal, and I'm aware of that. But if you're teaching a lesson and you got half a dozen to a whole class, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And so I'm aware that's going to be what it's going to be. Any questions about anything I've said so far before I proceed? I will say that this class used to be completely face-to-face, and it used to be 5 settings, 5 face-to-face settings, which is where we came up with 5 Zooms. And it used to be that one semester everybody would meet in Maryville. Next semester everybody would meet in St. Joe, and the next time everybody would meet in the Liberty. Well, we used to have access to a building here in Liberty. I live in Liberty. Used to live in Maryville and moved down here. So it has evolved. to where, well, and really Zoom is a better way to do that anymore. Okay, instead of being on the roads in February, it gets kind of weird. It is more fun to teach face to face, but this is a lot more efficient, and I'm aware of that. So, okay, so let me share screen and talk through this evening. And I'm already 15 minutes behind my lesson plan. Talk through the course site, talk through the evening, and just show. Okay, so Cameron, give me a thumbs up if you see my course site. Okay, very good. Okay, so and I think all of you have been in the course site. All of you have seen this. The office hour Zooms, I intend to make myself available. They may or may not always be at the corresponding time. We'll just have to see. And we'll have to talk a little bit before we get done here tonight, because the reason that Tristan is not with us is that I realized when we did this on a Tuesday night, I stomped on another class. And so we'll have that conversation when we get done here. So this evening, there's the videos. There's a lesson plan for this evening. I'm going to refine this thread discussion and feedback from session 1. I always add a couple questions that are based on what we talked about this evening. Now here is Teaching Standard 1. So you'll see in this course site, and you can see all at least the top of each module, where we have Standard 1, Standard 2, Standard 5, and Standard 7. Okay, now I don't have them all open right now because I kind of need to. I like to spend a little bit. I mean, I will open the rest of them here next week or so. But it's good. I like to spend a little bit one session to the next. So you can see the interviews, the video of you teaching, the PowerPoint upload, PowerPoint. So I'll come back to all that in a little bit. My goal is that the next time we meet, that each of you have a piece of the pie as far as the evening's presentation. That's what that's about. Then we get down in here, Standard 2, differentiated instruction, that kind of stuff. And it kind of, there's a theme there, a repeating theme. And then Standard 5, behavioral issues. And then Standard 7 is dealing with assessment data. Okay. And then at reflections. Now, we do have a, I think I want to go ahead and, I was going to publish this. Don't start on this yet, but because I want to talk about this a little bit more. But I do have a small, not enough to call a research paper, but I wanted to have a, what did I say here? Just, 2-page minimum, where we draw in information from researchers other than we've already talked about in class. Hattie, Lemov, Marzano, Wong, Rutherford, Kagan, other people like that. And we can talk about that some more. But I realized I wanted to go ahead and to show that to you. And I do this in the form of just dump the whole thing in the thread discussion. So instead of you just giving it to me and letting me read it, well, you can share it with each other. I think it makes things a little more relevant to you when you can read each other's work. And in my opinion, ups the ante just a little bit in what you're going to do. Because a lot of students are a little ho-hum about getting me stuff, but they don't want their people in their cohort to see anything but their best. And you probably know what I mean there. So, okay. So let's see, am I ready to drive on? I think so. Let me stop share real quick. Give a chance. Any other questions before we go to the next bit? Okay. I said in the video, I think I did, that this class is a little bit messy. I've had students in the past that were very goal-driven and wanted things lined out 100% perfect. Kirsten's nodding her head. 100% perfect as the course starts. And I never teach that way. And so there's a variety of reasons. One is I think good teachers spin from one class to the next a little bit, instead of locking themselves in. I could have all these assignments all open at the moment. But if somebody would go in and submit to an assignment down here, it locks me in. I can't make any adjustments. Okay, so I'll do it soon, but I kind of want us to get up and running before I start opening everything. So a little bit of ambiguity has always been how I teach, and because I want this to be very practicum based, nuts and bolts. You won't hear me talk much about philosophy. I've never been that kind of teacher. I wasn't that kind of principal. Kind of black and white, kind of straightforward. The longer I became a principal, the more blunt I became. Too blunt sometimes in hindsight, because being a principal, it just stripped me of my fluff. Because I'm just like this, 10, 12 hours a day, constantly, 6 or 7 days a week. And so I had to watch myself about getting too blunt, which was where I had to trust the counselors a lot. When I was at Warrensburg, had always had at least 3 counselors and then a social worker. And I went out of my way to not, and then I had 2 assistant principals who were kind of like me, kind of black and white. The world of administrators, you get kind of be black and white people. And I went out of my way to hire counselors that were not like administrators. Okay. And I didn't let them get in the role of being disciplinarians and that kind of stuff. I didn't believe in that, because the kid, they needed, when we'd have a meeting, kind of a cabinet meeting, I didn't want everybody with the same mindset. I wanted the counselors to see things from a different angle. That was how I looked at that. So, okay, I'm going to go in here in the share screen again and show you what we're going to do some more. Okay. So here's the first lesson plan. Open up here. Cameron, I can just see you. Thumbs up if you can see me okay. See this lesson plan? Very good. So I have some kind of a roll call introductions we're going to do here in a little bit. Call it reintroductions. I know that you just did the videos, which I anymore I do an intro video in every class I teach, because it helps me to see you, and because the little thumbnail on the course site is never big enough, and so there's some probing questions here. I'll look at this picture here, and this will be a way I'll give each of you, I don't know, maybe 60 seconds to answer these questions, and then as you move through it, when you get done, you'll ask someone that preceded you a question about something that they said. Kind of as a way to create cross conversation in the course in our evening. Then we'll get down here. I want to talk more about the site. I've done a little bit of this already. I want to talk about the models from last semester. And because the PowerPoints, the parts of the conversation, the person that you worked with last semester, if you worked with somebody else, you'll pair up again for your piece for our next Zoom. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then I have some, we'll use some breakouts in Zoom to talk about the 4 standards as time progresses. Okay. So I'm going to unshare in just a little bit. So I came across this picture, and you've probably seen this in other classes too. You can't do the Bloom stuff until you take care of the Maslow stuff. So I'm going to just kind of click down through the course site, let you talk about what the quote means to you, an example that maybe you've seen so far in your real world. And so 30, 45 seconds, a minute tops, and then ask somebody a question that preceded you. You will find, I tell people all the time that anytime you can create situations for students to be talking to other students, then it's usually a version of higher ordered learning. Okay. And it's a student engagement concept. So in this setting, I will always try to look for ways to create situations for you to talk to another student. That's why later in the evening, when we get to breakouts, there's some questions there. We will create 4 breakouts, and each breakout will have one of the standards, and I'll have you talk about it. Then after about 10 minutes, I'll have you together again, and I'll shuffle the groups again and have you talk to other people in the class about what you just talked about. It's called a double jigsaw activity. So hopefully I can show you things that you'll try to use someday in large group instruction. Okay. Okay. Stop share. Now, have y'all heard of Spencer Kagan? Kagan strategies? Kagan. Okay, write that one down. Spencer Kagan is the guru of cooperative learning, of getting students engaged, all kinds of things that Spencer Kagan talks about. He's the one that talks about stand up, hand up, pair up. Okay, if you've probably seen people do that, that's a Spencer Kagan activity. He talks about jigsaw activities where you have a reading and you break it up and you have kids become experts in their little piece and have them talk about it, then put them back together. He has students do inside out, rotating groups. He has students doing the popcorn activity where you have them write questions and toss them around the room. So student engagement, talk about Spencer Kagan. We'll also talk a lot about Harry Wong. Have you heard of Harry Wong? Okay. As a principal and alt-cert person, Harry Wong has a book. It's an old school classic called The First Days of School. As principal, we would give our teachers this book. And it talks about routines and procedures. It doesn't talk about discipline. It talks about routines. He wrote this 20 years ago, and it's still relevant. This is version 5, I think, and it's still very relevant. As a matter of fact, our daughter came home from college one time. She did her undergrad at Emporia State. She did not want to go to school where her dad was the department chair. Imagine that. And we said, Catherine, we have a present for you. And she said, oh, what is that? You know, I think it's going to be a new pair of boots or something like that. And so my wife and I handed her this book. Okay, I thought only teachers will give their kids a Harry Wong book as a present. But Catherine uses this. She's in her 6th year of teaching, and she is the queen of routines and procedures. Okay, so you can still get this at Barnes and Noble, and it's still good stuff. Okay, so we'll talk about some of the big name people. We'll talk about Lemov. We'll talk about Hattie. We'll talk about Marzano. Those are big name people that the teachers in your practicum settings, they will know these names. Okay, hopefully this will give you some common language, and they'll go, oh, a counselor knows about Lemov? A counselor knows about Harry Wong? Well, yeah. It'll help you beyond this. And the shared language will help you serve kids better. Okay. And I'll give you another good little tidbit here. As a counselor, and you know this, let's see. Like Ashley. Ashley, I know you're a counselor of record right now, I believe, right?
Yes.
Yes, you are the counselor. And you know that kids get in trouble in class. Okay. And sometimes counselors get sucked into that conversation working with a kid, often a squirrely little boy who's getting in trouble in class. Okay. And you'll get sucked in those conversations. Now, hopefully they won't get you into the discipline side of it, but you'll get sucked in those conversations. As hopefully when you get done with this class, you'll be able to, when you go back to that 3rd grade teacher's room where the kid's always getting in trouble, you can look at it with an eye of, I think I have a feeling for why he's in trouble. He's not busy enough. That little boy, Yes, third grade boys are squirmy. Middle school boys are squirmy. If they have time on their hands, they get in trouble. If they're bored, they get in trouble. Okay, so the idea is that you'll be able to have a sidebar conversation with the teacher. Say, well, maybe he has too much time on his hands. Maybe very gently you can talk about student engagement. And it's in self-defense. The more you know about student engagement, the less they're going to get in trouble. It goes hand in hand with classroom management. So again, I'm trying to give you strategies to help with your shared language. Okay? All right, I've been talking a lot more than I really want to be talking. Okay, so I'm going to pick on Jordan first because you're on my upper left and I want to hear your dog's name too. And so talk to us about the Maslow picture. What's it mean to you? Have you seen any examples of having to take care of that, the concepts behind that picture? And talk, you have the floor for about 45 seconds. And then the person that follows you will get to ask you a question about what you just said. Okay? Go.
Okay. My dog's name's Maggie. And then as far as what that quote means to me, I mean, I was a psych major, so I really know a lot more about Maslow and that hierarchy of needs.
Yes.
So this makes me think of like my very first day starting at my school. There is a kid who was not eating lunch. And I was instantly thinking, oh, this is my job now. I have to figure out what's going on. Why aren't we eating lunch? And he kind of refused to eat lunch. And then that very next class, he just was not paying attention. He was hungry because he didn't eat. And so I was like, do we need a snack? And he did. So that's kind of what it makes me think of.
Okay, thank you. And really, you'll find, and you know this, teachers keep crackers in their desk out of self-defense. When kids are hungry, they don't pay attention. When they don't pay attention, they get in trouble. And it gives a teacher heartburn. Okay, sometimes it's easier to give a kid a cracker than it is to yell at them. Sometimes it's easier just to give them another pencil than yell at them for losing their pencil. Okay, you pick your battles. Okay. Middle school boys are always hungry. And so when you learn that, I taught middle school. So there's a boy named Clarence that he was a big growing boy. And he'd always saunter over the teacher table late in the lunch shift and kind of give his eyes like, got any food left? And so we'd always, if we could swipe an extra cookie or something like that, give it to Clarence. And he behaved better when you fill him up. Okay. Megan, you're next. Go. And remember, talk, then ask Jordan a question.
Okay, so I don't ask a question first.
I don't care. I'm not that persnickety.
Oh, no, it doesn't matter. I just want, okay. So when I look at the quote, similar to what Jordan is saying, I think you have to meet their most needed level, before you can go up to the next level. So whether it's food or whether it's acceptance, whether it's, I'm trying to think safety, you can't help them reach their full potential until you get their lower needs met. And I think that's important for school counselors to remember, because the students that you're going to be meeting a lot of times with, they probably will need help meeting those lower needs. That's what I've got. Okay, so now I ask my question. Jordan, is that a common concern in your school? Do you usually have kids that kind of need that basic need met before you can go on?
It was actually just my first day that this kid refused to eat lunch. I don't know if he just didn't want to be back in school or what he was doing, but ever since that, he's kind of ate. And right now, for at least so far in this year, we've kind of had free lunch. So I think that helped a lot of our students with that.
Sure. Cool.
And I'm sure you all know that the standard way that schools track poverty in their school setting is a percentage of students on free and reduced lunch. Okay. And it's a logical thing to track. It's a logical thing to keep track of. Be aware though, even as a principal, they would not share with me the list of students who are on free and reduced lunch. And I didn't try very hard, but the school people, you need to treat all your kids the same. Okay, so hopefully in the cafeteria setting, the lunch ladies don't differentiate one kid from the other based on their free reduced lunch status. They're not supposed to. Okay, because kids are brutal about that. Okay, and so you will find that I bet at Plattsburgh, it's probably at least before COVID, probably 60 to 70% free and reduced lunch before COVID. A lot of schools, they just feed them all now if they're there, or they send food home or that kind of stuff. Okay. So St. Joe, probably 70, 80% free and reduced lunch. So it really, I'm kind of scanning the schools. Platte County may be the lowest free and reduced lunch of any of them. It's probably still 40 some odd percent. It's very different, very different. Now, my daughter teaches in the school. They're building probably 10% free and reduced lunch. Okay. She teaches in one of the more affluent suburbs of Olathe. It does not mean she doesn't have kids that are very needy. Okay. She has a lot of students that she's dealing with on the spectrum for autism. She has a lot of issues there. So when she talks about her kids having meltdowns, it's not generally because they're hungry. They have other issues. So be careful about assuming that free and reduced lunch has a direct correlation with behaviors. Okay. It just means that their families are not, well, they're struggling financially, and we know that. Lauren, you're next. Go.
Okay, so when I read the quote, the first thing that came to mind was like a multi-tiered fountain and the concept of filling your cup. So you can't fill your education cup and your learning cup without filling the top cup. So like when the water drips down the fountain, typically when the top is full, then it spills over to the bigger bowl. And so that's what I thought of when I read that quote, because you need your basic needs met before you can meet your academic needs. And then Megan, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Out of Maslow's needs, what do you think is the most important to be fulfilled?
I mean, ideally, we all want them to get to a self-actualization. But I mean, whatever need is needed at the moment, I think that's the most important. Sure, in a perfect world, the top one is the most important, but you got to go the lower ones first to get there.
Lauren, I appreciate your analogy of the fountains, but I'm sorry, where my mind went was those champagne things at weddings where you pour it in, you got all the cups and that kind of stuff. I shouldn't be thinking of alcohol in the middle of class. So, okay. So, Caitlin, you're next. Now, you can ask anybody that went in front, okay? Jordan, Megan, or Lauren, a question, which is a teaching strategy, okay? It keeps Jordan from completely tuning out, and that's by design. When you ask questions in class, sometimes you can put all their names on popsicle sticks. You draw them out to ask questions. You can decide, if I pull their name out and ask a question, you can put that stick on the desk beside you and not put it back in the cup, or you can put it back in the cup. Okay, and you do that by design, however you want to do it each time. If a kid knows their name is back in the cup, they have to be paying attention instead of assuming that once they ask a question, they can snooze out. Okay, these are legitimate teaching strategies that you put in your back pocket. Okay, so hopefully when you get done with this class, you've got a whole bunch of those things that you can try. Okay, And you can watch the classroom teachers. How do they call on students? Do they put the stick, or it can be a cube, or it's all different, or a poker chip or something. There's all different ways to do it. Do they put it back in the box, or do they set it aside? And they mix it up. They can mix it up. Or do they cheat and pull the same kid out more than once if a kid is just going to sleep on them? Okay. Caitlin, go.
So the first time that I saw that quote, it kind of made me think of that all basic needs need to be met, like Maslow's hierarchy needs to be met before learning can actually occur for students. Speaking from something that I've seen when I was a peer tutor in high school, I was in a second grade class, and this boy, he was sleeping during class and obviously not engaging. And come to find out, he was having things going on at home. So making sure that those needs are being met before him being able to engage and learn is something that's really important. Jordan, I have a question for you. Do you see like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs being a concern in your school at all?
I mean, I feel like no matter what school you go to, there's always going to be some kids that like school is their safe place. And so that fulfills that need, or like food, water, and rest. Those are things that just depends on the day for some of those kids. Some kids wake up late, forget breakfast, and then sometimes they're too late to get breakfast at the cafeteria. It just kind of depends. I do know right now with COVID, it's hard because we try to keep them from eating in the classroom because they have to wear their masks. So I guess in that sense, that might be a struggle right now. I don't know. It's kind of, they go up and down on it.
I had to learn as principal to trust my teachers. And you all know about this by now. There are some teachers that really have their act together in the classroom. As a principal, if I would walk in, one of the strong teachers, and there's a kid sleeping at the back of the room, the teacher usually look at me like, stay out of it. I got this. Okay. So the good teachers would give me a look like, I got this. Leave me alone. That kid sleeping back. I know that kid is sick, half sick, or something. They're not being disrespectful. Okay. Now some kids I knew were being disrespectful. I didn't much like that. Okay. But the more you know your kids, the more you know if some kid is really droopy at the back of the room, something's going on. Okay. And good teachers will be in tune with that. So I used to say, okay, don't let kids sleep. High school, it's disrespectful. Sometimes it is. But I learned to trust the strong with it teachers and they appreciated that. I visited a teacher's in my alt cert world. I visited a special ed classroom in Independence. Walk in, there was a kid asleep on the floor in the beanbag. The teacher was afraid that I was going to be upset. I was her supervisor and her advisor, that letting this kid sleep. When she said, well, this kid just showed up out of the blue yesterday. Don't know anything about him. Had been exhausted, and they're just letting him sleep. I said, hey, I get it. And maybe my first couple of years of being a principal, I might have been a little more caustic about it. After 38 years in this business, I get it. So again, that's a Maslow thing. It also comes with knowing the kids. Okay, that's a differentiated instruction thing. The more you know about the kids, and you know this as counselors, the more you know your kids, the better you can serve them. Okay, Faith, you're next. Go.
I forgot I was muted. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, bummer. Sorry, my screen keeps freezing up, but I will go quickly. So with that quote, one thing kind of just encompassing what everybody else has said is if your students are lacking in their basic needs, they're not going to be able to reach their full potential. And so it's important to check in on your students when you can, if you've noticed something is off. And I've seen this with my GA-ship quite a few times. I work with the Student Success Center and the Academic Retention Unit. And so a lot of the times those students are on probation because they didn't meet the GPA to keep good academic standing. And so a lot of the times it's not just that they're lazy and they're not turning stuff in, it's they've got other things going on, those other basic needs aren't being met. And so I'll have to talk with colleagues and superiors about what we can do to help them reach those needs, what we can do to get them connected to resources to meet those needs. So my question is for Lauren, and it's Lauren, I know you work a lot with students on campus as well. And so I was just curious if you've also, I mean, obviously keeping confidentiality in mind, but seeing cases like I have as well, just from a different side of campus.
Yeah, I have. I actually, this last semester, had to replace one of our executive board members because they weren't performing at their best, or performing the expectations that we were needing of them. And come to find out, it was because their needs weren't being met on like the Maslow side. And so it was ultimately affecting their entire performance in all aspects. So school, work, the work that they were doing for us in the OSI. So I have seen it in my GA-ship with college students as well.
Let's see. Cameron, you're on. Go.
So when it first come to mind, basically the same thing everybody else said, but you just can't get that higher, even regular order thinking, but even higher order thinking isn't going to come near close to coming into play if you don't have any of those, or even just one need met. Anything can really happen. I guess a real life experience of this would be when I had behavioral class management a year or two ago. Well, I guess it was in undergrad. We had a preschool teacher come in and talk about some behavioral system she was doing or had conducted, and talked about how a lot of her students had these problems and she just had to work case by case and go through each person. And so it was very difficult and took a lot of time. And so I just kind of thought that was interesting.
Okay.
My question, I guess, would be to Faith. When you go about deciding what the need, not safety wise, but needs wise, do they decide more what they want to work on, or do you help them through that?
Like with my undergrad students?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of times they'll disclose to us that they've got stuff going on. And so I just kind of use my psych background to think about those hierarchy of needs, and see that, like, okay, their safety isn't being met because of this, or they don't have the resources right now to eat, or stuff like that. So I just help them get connected to those resources, but a lot of the times it's self-disclosure to us.
Thank you. Ashley, you're next. You're on. Go.
Okay. So whenever I think of the quote, the first thing is that kids respond better when their needs are met, kind of like what everybody else has said. But I also think it teaches us as educators to pay more attention to our students and the kids that we work with. And on the other side, it shows the kids that we are present and that we are here to help them. So I think it just combines both of those. Kind of a real life example, and kind of like what Jordan said, when school first started, I had an 8th grade girl who would not eat lunch. And every day we would try to encourage her to take even one bite, but come to find out she has really bad social anxiety. And so once we kind of figured out that her needs are not being met, we made accommodations. And so now she eats in a classroom, a teacher who has a plan. She eats a full meal every day. And it's just,
That's kind of my real life example. And I think that's all I got.
Do you all remember how brutal cafeteria is? Middle school, high school cafeteria? Can you think of any more slice of American society that can be more brutal than the very first day of the middle school or high school? We used to be very cognizant of watching kids when they come into the cafeteria the very first day. And we look at kids, they're sitting by themselves, some kid coming in, they look terrified because they know there's a cool kid table and there's everybody else. Okay, and you can't control that. But you don't let kids bully kids. And if some kid comes in and they've got that scared look and there's going to be somebody, and you just sidle up to them and say, hey, let me find you a seat. Or some kids over here by themselves, hey, can we sit here? And so hopefully you're in tune with that the very first day of school. Because especially in the high school setting, they know that where they sit the very first day, the very first lunch, they're going to sit there the rest of the year, maybe the rest of their high school career. Okay. So it's a slice of American brutal, and good example of Maslow's, but it's also a place where we used to flood the cafeteria the very first day, all the counselors, all the administrators, to be watching for that kind of thing, and setting the tone and getting kids where they're not feeling ostracized or anything like that. Make sense? Okay. Mallory, you're on next. Go.
Okay. So kind of to piggyback off what everyone else is saying, when I see that quote, I just think that, we have to meet the needs of students before, the learning can occur, kind of like what Caitlin was saying. And just, we can't expect them to learn if those needs aren't being met as well. I personally, a good example I think of is just honestly the whole COVID situation. Some of the students that I work with on campus, one of the needs I have noticed the past 2 semesters that isn't being met is the connection with others, kind of keeping in touch with family or friends that was lost. And so I noticed with some of my students, they were struggling academically, which, maybe before COVID that may not have happened. So that's just something I've seen. And then also with that is just the health and the sense of security, I guess. I definitely think that impacted their academics. A question I have for Ashley is, because this is your first year as a counselor, what have you noticed with like middle school students? What's like the main need that hasn't been met during this time that you've noticed?
I really think the connection that you're making with students and exactly what you had said, especially with our virtual learners that we have, a lot of times they're not doing very well as if they were in school face-to-face. And it's really hard because we're face-to-face full-time, but we offer virtual. And right now in the middle school, I think we have like 10 to 15 students virtual. And I can really tell the difference from their how they're doing virtually versus how they did even last year before COVID and we got let out. So I really do think what you said is probably our biggest challenge that we've seen this year.
Thank you. Allison, your turn.
This quote made me think of something that my counselor does really well. Anytime, or the one that I'm working with, anytime that she is doing like a check and connect or bringing a kid to her office or someone comes in, like she always first, no matter what, like they want to deal with, asks, what did you have for lunch yesterday? Or like, what did you have for supper last night? Or like, how'd you sleep? Like she always asks about the basic needs. So I thought that's really good. And that's something I plan to do in the future. And my question is for Caitlin, and it is, how can you check that your kids basic needs are met day to day when you're a counselor?
I think right now, especially just starting in this semester, I've been doing a lot of like classroom lessons, and that is like every week I meet with the grade level. So just being in there, getting familiar with students and their situations. So checking on those students that may have higher needs is really important, but also making sure just to make the time to stop into the classroom and speaking with the teacher, see if they're noticing anything, and pulling out students if they need to have some of those needs met.
Thank you. Kirsten, last but not least.
So I obviously had the same kind of thought process as we're all counselors or counselors to be. I focused more on the Maslow's and just thought, so my mom is a teacher, and she told me one day that she gets frustrated because they can't expect some of their students to thrive in an environment that doesn't meet their basic needs, but that environment is oftentimes at home and not at school. And so it gets frustrating to not be able to control all of that that's going on in the home front situation as well. And so she tries to control it as much as she can at school. And it kind of took me back to when we took our first class I think we ever took in our grad school program with Dr. Barnett. And we had a discussion about how there were some schools that had more access to resources, and like the students within the school that had more access to resources and their basic needs honestly were being more met, that had better academic success, versus whenever he had worked with or seen or read about schools that had limited resources or limited access to really basic stuff that they needed, their students didn't perform as well academically. So I thought of that as well, because I think that's just a generalized idea of not even just a student by student basis, but also school district to school district having different resources available to them, and how that basic need might be met at a school level or not met at a school level. And then my question is for Mal. I was just going to ask if you have seen a difference working with your students in your practicum and in your GA position, and how they're performing academically with their needs not being met completely because of COVID.
I'll be honest, I haven't worked with any of my students yet in practicum, so I don't really have an answer for you, but I would assume there's probably some similar challenges for students, especially with high school students, probably that level of connection with others. But again, I'm not 100% sure.
Kirsten, I think your conversation about resources, I'll use my daughter's school again. Her building is in maybe the second most affluent neighborhoods of Olathe. Okay, like I said, but my daughter works very, very hard, and so whatever issues her kids have, it's not because there's not financial needs at home. Okay. They have a lot of other family needs. But I think that what we see in this time of COVID is a big difference in the haves and have-nots and the digital world. They call it the digital divide. I think about maybe the differences, well, like right now, like I use my daughter's school again. Probably all her kids are going home to a house that has strong Wi-Fi. Okay. And I bet, Allison, I bet you have kids out around West Nottoway that do not have good, strong Wi-Fi at home. So it's a whole different concept to ask them to do digital homework. It's an issue. It's an issue. When I go visit where my dad still lives out in the country up there south of Brookfield, his Wi-Fi, I mean, he doesn't use it, but when we're there, but it would not be strong enough, because it crossed my mind. Sometimes I may go up there and teach a class, visit Dad, but his Wi-Fi would not support this Zoom session. Okay, it is just not strong enough. And the cell phone towers, just not strong enough to handle that. So you know there are kids that are going to get behind academically during these times. And it's only going to get worse. That's why I'm hearing more conversations about you got to get, the schools got to be open. They got to have them in face to face, because as much as we hate the COVID, we know what's happening, and kids do not learn well at home. And you know this by now. So, okay. Any questions before we step to the next piece? Okay. I'm going to stop recording to